All right, welcome back. We are on letter 27, which is on the good which abides. And we'll just jump right into this here. He says, okay. And he says, what say you? Are you giving me advice? Indeed, have you already advised yourself, already corrected your own faults? Is this the reason why you have leisure to reform other men? No, I am not so shameless as to undertake to cure my fellow men when I am ill myself. I am, however, discussing with you troubles which concern us both, and sharing the remedy with you, just as if you were lying ill in the same hospital. Listen to me, therefore, as you would if I were talking to myself. I am admitting you to my innermost thoughts, and am having it out with myself, merely making use of you as my pretext. Okay, so he's a little upset with Lucilius because Lucilius apparently is giving Seneca some advice and telling him some things that he's doing wrong. And Seneca's saying, look, it's not the same when I'm sending you letters, and I'll tell you why. The reason why is because I am talking about the stuff that we're all struggling with. I'm not talking about you specifically. I don't think that I have everything fixed, and so I can tell you how to fix yourself. Okay, he's saying what I am doing is I am talking to myself, and I'm letting you listen to what I am saying. That's what these letters are. They're really for me. And it's funny because that's what I found that when I was making YouTube videos, that they were really for me, right? They were things that I was learning, and I was talking to myself as I was teaching things. In verse 2, he says, I keep crying out to myself, count your years, and you will be ashamed to desire and to pursue the same things you desired in your boyhood days. Of this one thing, make sure against your dying day. Let your faults die before you die. Away with those disordered pleasures, which must be dearly paid for. It is not only those which are to come that harm me, but also those which have come and gone. Just as crimes, even if they have not been detected when they were committed, do not allow anxiety to end with them. So, with guilty pleasures, regret remains even after the pleasures are over. They are not substantial, they are not trustworthy. Even if they do not harm us, they are fleeting. So, he's saying, here's an example of what he says to himself, right? Count your years. Okay, you're going to be ashamed of all the desire you put in to pursue all these things that you were still desiring when you're a boy. Okay, and said by the time that you die, make sure that your faults die before you die. All right, and stop chasing after all these pleasures that have to be paid for dearly. Okay, because they do come to harm. They do harm you. It's like just like if a crime that hasn't been detected when it's committed, it still is a crime. It still causes an effect. So the thing with these guilty pleasures, it's the same type of thing. Is that someone might not know about it. It may not seem to cause harm, but even if it doesn't cause harm, it's still fleeting. It's still not going to give you the lasting value that you're hoping for. Cast about rather for some good which will abide. But there can be no such good except as the soul discovers it for itself within itself. Virtue alone affords everlasting and peace-giving joy. Even if some obstacle arise, it is but like an intervening cloud which floats beneath the sun but never prevails against it. So he's saying instead of going after these fleeting pleasures or these desires, look for the good that will stay with you always, which is only the good that is within yourself, right? Virtue. Virtue alone gives you peace and joy. And even if something comes up, it's like this cloud that blocks out the sun so that you don't get burned up by the sun, right? It still gives you shade. It still makes things easier. When will it be your lot to attain this joy? Thus far, you have indeed not been sluggish, but you must quicken your pace. Much toil remains. To confront it, you must yourself lavish all your waking hours and all your efforts if you wish the result to be accomplished. This matter cannot be delegated to someone else. So you've got to do this yourself. No one else can do this for you. And you've been on the path, but you better hurry up. All right. The other kind of literary activity admits of outside assistance. Within our own time, there was a certain rich man named Calvisius Sabinus. He had the bank account and the brains of a freedman. I never saw a man whose good fortune was a greater offense against his propriety. His memory was so faulty that he would sometimes forget the name of Ulysses or Achilles or Priam, names which we know as well as we know those of our own attendants. No major domo in his dotage, who cannot give men the right names, but is so compelled to invent names for them. No such a man, I say, calls off the names of his master tribesmen so atrociously as Sabinus used to call off the Trojan and Achaean heroes. But nonetheless, did he desire to appear learned. Okay, so this is so back in those days, right? Obviously, these were famous names: Ulysses, Achilles, and Priam, right? And so he's saying that the other kind of literary activity. Okay, so the knowledge that you have, all right, you could have outside assistance from that, right? To actually develop the true virtue, you can't have outside assistance. But yeah, there's this rich guy, okay, and he has a big bank account, but he had no brains, all right, and he couldn't even remember some very basic things that we all know, all right, but he was fine. Okay, because he could utilize other people in order to acquire that knowledge. He didn't need to do that. And he wanted to appear to be learned, but he wasn't. He wasn't very smart, but it didn't matter because he had the money. Someone else could do those things, right? Someone can't create virtue for you. So he devised a shortcut to learning. He paid fabulous prices for slaves, one to know Homer by heart and another to know Hesiod. He also delegated a special slave to each of the 9 lyric poets. You need not wonder that he paid high prices for these slaves. If he did not find them ready to hand, he had them made to order. After collecting this retinue, he began to make life miserable for his guests. He would keep these fellows at the foot of his couch and ask them from time to time for verses which he might repeat and then frequently break down in the middle of a word. Okay, so it's like I said, he just paid all these people to have all this knowledge for him to make him seem like he was smart. And people were annoyed by this, obviously. Centellius Quadratus, a flouter of them, suggested to Sabinus that he should have philologists to gather up the bits. Sabinus remarked that each slave cost him 100,000 sesterces. Centellius replied, "You might have bought as many bookcases for a smaller sum." But Sabinus held the opinion that what any member of his household knew, he himself also knew, right? So basically someone was like, look, this is crazy. Why are you doing this? You could just buy a bunch of books and you could have had this knowledge. And he's saying, it doesn't matter. What anyone in my house knows, I know. He had this opinion, okay? So in verse 8, he says, this same Centellius began to advise Sabinus to take wrestling lessons. Sickly, pale, and thin as he was, Sabinus answered, "How can I? I can scarcely stay alive now." "Don't say that, I implore you," replied the other. "Consider how many perfectly healthy slaves you have. No man is able to borrow or buy a sound mind. In fact, as it seems to me, even though sound minds were for sale, they would not find buyers. Depraved minds, however, are bought and sold every day." So he's saying here that, the whole point of this is that there are some things that you can buy with money and some things that you can't. And so that's why he said with the wrestling, all right, or, he advised him to take wrestling lessons. He's like, I can't do it. He's like, well, don't you have a bunch of slaves that you bought that are healthy? And the idea is that, no, that doesn't matter, right? So there's some things you can buy, some things that you can't, okay? And he's saying that you can't borrow or buy a sound mind, all right? Even though sound minds were for sale, even if they were, they wouldn't find buyers. No one would buy it. Okay, but depraved minds, however, those are bought and sold every day. You can buy a depraved mind. That's easy. He says in verse 9, "But let me pay off my debt and say farewell. Real wealth is poverty adjusted to the law of nature." Epicurus has this saying in various ways and contexts, but it can never be repeated too often, since it can never be learned too well. For some persons, the remedy should be merely prescribed. In other cases, it should be forced down their throats. Farewell. All right, so again, a quote from Epicurus, that real wealth is poverty adjusted to the law of nature. So what is poverty adjusted to the law of nature? It means that you consider what nature says would be poverty, not what you think is poverty. And when you do that, then you'll have real wealth, because whatever you have is going to be wealth, okay? Because nature only requires what? Bread and water. And so he said it so many times in different contexts, but the reason why is because this is very important, and it will continue to be repeated. And in some cases, someone can hear this and listen to it. In other cases, it just has to be forced down their throats. They have to keep on hearing it over and over again in order to get it. And that is it for today. We'll see you tomorrow.